everybody. It's fantastic to be here to come and see what you guys have been doing, and we are in Malalan. We're leading a church. We are 25 people in the church. And, so you easily get disheartened after a year. But then when you come here today and you see this is where we started, 25 people, and this is how it looks like now, I'm really much more motivated. Such a lot has changed. There's a baby corner isn't there anymore. All the little kids, the baby kids are now in primary school. I remember when Kara one day brought those two little girls to me, and the one was screaming and screaming and screaming. And at a stage, she said to the little girl, I don't know which one it was, stop screaming. This is not only a doctor, it's the pastor also. And then after that, the child really started screaming, So I still want to know what the difference is between who's a bad guy, the pastor or the doctor. I just come back from 28 days with Charlotte, and I went on a tour through Namibia, and it was really a fantastic time with her. But I would just like to share with you how our tour started. So I usually go with my three boys every year in Africa, Wild Africa. We share our hearts. We call each other out on character faults. We catch fish and all those type of things. But every time that I get to a gate, I stop. And I know somebody will get out and open the gate. And then, doesn't matter which one of the three, the gate open, and then we go through. And that's how we go on for years now, and numerous gates that's been opened. So on our first day at Tweerivieren in Kalahari, there's a gate. And I stop automatically, and nothing happens. So after a while, I hear the door open. And Charlotte goes out and opens the door, the gate. And when I pass her, I saw that she is really not happy. So when she got back in the car, she said to me, why don't you ask me nicely to go and open the gate? So the next thing she said, you don't say nice things to me anymore. Do you still love me? And I said, Lord, please help this marriage over the next 28 days so it's for us to survive. And then we got to the camp. And 22 days we camped in, and we had a canvas tent, one of those dome tents, not those ninny tents, those ones that you have the fiberglass poles, 2.5 by 2.5 tent. And she and I had to pitch that tent for 11 times in the strip. If you think that your marriage is strong and that you've done enough marriage enrichment courses, then it's time for you to go and pitch a tent with your wife, So at this stage, our marriage is doing much, much better than the beginning of the 28 days. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, my talk today is 8 + 1 easy ways to reach the world. And I'm starting off, can you make up, Mark, please, with a little bit of a background. I like this podium, and it's much better than when we had it. Who was that girl that stayed on your farm as well that made the nice curry? Angelia. Yeah. So Angela came to me and said to me when we started off here, you guys must be careful not to become a Christian island and not be relevant in town. And that has stuck with me for the past 6 years. The second thing is I talked with Rob Gibbs, and Rob said to me, that the churches are actually growing at the cost of other churches. So what's happening at this stage at a lot of places that you think the church is growing, but all that you see is that there's rotations from Christians from one church to another church to another church. So one church will grow at the cost of another church. And then the third thing that really made me to think a lot was when we last year in Malalan, we had a Malalan for Jesus weekend where 7 churches got together. It was an amazing weekend. But the majority of the people that attended that weekend was Christians, not people from the world. I don't know if, there must be only a few people that attended it. So it was really good for unity of the church. But it wasn't just attracting people from the world, And then last thing I realized, and I think all of you know, is that we are there where we as a church have to go into the community. The community is not coming down to us. We will have to do that. Now are we going to do that? We have to start becoming relevant in a community where we go and introduce evangelism in our daily routine. So, what's the point of going into town? So the WHO last year did a survey on social interaction, and they found that 1 out of 6 people are lonely. When you go down to the younger people, 1 out of 5 people are lonely. 800 deaths per hour due to a loneliness-associated problem. And the reason for that is threefold. The first one is that we get digital connection in place of human connection. So that's the one thing. The second thing, and this is such an important thing for the church, there's a decline in community life. So there's a decline in community gatherings. There's a decline in religion gatherings. There's a decline in civil gatherings, in social gatherings, in sport gatherings. And they talk about the third space. So they say your community gathering, it's so important to get the third space, because the first space is your family, the second space is your work, and that's where you interact. And that's where you make the relationships. But nowadays, we get a situation that because of the decline in community life, the third space isn't important anymore. So now we get relationships at work, and we get relationships at church, at home, and that's not enough. The third thing is a modern lifestyle. So what we know in the modern lifestyle is financial pressure, smaller families, fathers that works away, mother and father that works, people that's tired at the end of the day. And those are the important reasons at this stage for an increase in loneliness, and this is what's happening in this community. So, what happens when you get lonely? You will know, Carla, is that you will get depression, you'll get anxiety. Who's the people at risk? Not the older people, the young people, the teenagers, the students, the adults between 20 and 30, and then lastly, obviously, the lonely people. So we as a church must go into the community and be relevant and focus especially on these lonely people because they need us. So if we go and look at Lazy View, 2025, there's 5,500 people there. The mean age is 31. And then if you go and see, if we say 1 to 6 is lonely, 900 people are lonely at this stage. There's been a 60% growth from 2020 to 2025 of this town. So if you get that type of percentage of growth, that means that there's a lot of strangers there, that there's a lot of lonely people there. So the responsibility of the church, what? In Matthew 28 it says, therefore go into the world. Number one, therefore go. The second thing is in the parable of talents, we talk about, the master said, well done, good and faithful servant. Over few you were faithful, over much you will be entrusted. Come into the favor of your master. So, faithfulness of the season. And then the third thing, if we go and look at Matthew 6, it says, that for, why do you worry about what you wear or what you're going to drink or what you're going to eat? The pagans go after these things. Your Father knows that you need it, but you first put the kingdom of God first, and I will provide your needs. That's what your Father says to you. So 3 things from the church. Therefore, go into the world. The second thing, be faithful in your season. And the third thing is put the kingdom first. So I'm going to start off with the 8 easy things how to go into the world and be faithful in your season. So the first one is see something, do something. So there's a famine in 1993 in Sudan. I've talked about this quickly before we went away from ACV about this topic. So there's this famine in Sudan. And the United Nations has got a lot of financial problems, and they see that they don't have enough funds to feed the people. So they asked for 2 photographers from South Africa to come up, take photos, and let the world know what's going on in Darfur so that they can get more funds. So Kevin Carter and George De Silva go up to Darfur. And one day on the airstrip in IOP, Kevin Carter stands there and he takes a photo. And that photo was printed in the New York Times on 23 May 1993. It became one of the most 100 influential photos of the century. He won a Pulitzer Prize for that, and that is how, the Oscars usually for actors, that's a Pulitzer Prize. And the world became aware of Sudan, and millions of rands were donated, and there was thousands of lives that were saved. And so, can you put that first slide up for me, please? So this is the slide. It's a little boy who was walking towards a medical station, a United Nations medical station, and about 1.5 kilometers from the station, he collapsed. So Kevin saw this, and he took the photo, and that obviously is a photo that got all the accolades. So he got the Pulitzer Prize. He goes onto the radio, and he has an interview. And the people ask him, so they say, well done on your prize, on the Pulitzer Prize. Well done on the photo. And you saved thousands of people, obviously with people donating money to the cause in Sudan. What happened to that little boy? What happened? What did you do? And he said, well, I looked at the situation, I took the photo, I chased away the vulture, I went and sat under a tree, I smoked, and I cried to God because of the hopelessness of the situation, the misery, the people dying around us, and the helplessness. So they say, okay, but what about the boy? And he said, I don't know. And then the phone call started coming in. Said, what do you mean you don't know what happened to that boy? He said, well, the soldiers said I mustn't touch the children. We mustn't touch the children because they might have a disease. So they say, that's not good enough. It's not good enough. This little boy, 1.5 kilometers from that station, why didn't you pick him up? Why didn't you walk through to the station, to the medical station, and go and put him down there? And there was a huge public outcry of this, and eventually at the end of the day, this child made it. He made it to there, and he died of malaria, I think, when he was 14 or 15 years old. So, the thing that came out of this is what we call the bystander effect. The bystander effect is where you observe something. I see pain. I see sadness. I see a marriage in trouble. I see trauma. I see sorrow. And I document it because I know it is important to document it so that somebody else can do something. So I inform other people. This is the problem. I point towards the problem, and I've done my part now. And then I get upset if you don't do anything about it. Because I've done my part now. And the third thing, but I don't get involved. the thing here is, I am tired. I'm emotionally drained. I've got too much over my plate. I've got problems at work. And there's valid reasons for that. But I don't get involved. So the bystander effect means, it's a psychosocial phenomenon that we say, that when an individual sees need in somebody else, the chances is less that he will intervene if there are people around. And the more the people, the less chance that he will take responsibility to go and make a difference in that life, or the difference in the need of somebody else. Because he goes out from the opinion at the end of the day is, I assume somebody else will go and do something. So what effect will it have in our community? What effect will it have in our church? So in our church, I see there's a need. I see there's a need in children's ministry. But I don't do anything because I feel it's not my area of giftedness. Or there's somebody else that's better qualified to go and do that. And then I miss it that God wants to use me there. And that He brought that under my attention. So number one is, see something, do something. In your situation, in your work, wherever you are, if you see that there's a need, do it. Don't wait for somebody else to go and do it or assume somebody else is going to do it. The second thing is bring what you have. So, Elijah and the widow. So the widow's husband dies. Elisha. The widow's husband dies. And the creditors come to take her to sons to sell them to pay back the debt. So she calls to Elisha. She says to him, man of God, please help me. And he says to her, what can I do for you? What do you have? And she said, I have a jar of oil. And he said, go and get more. And then God did a miracle after that. The second thing is that I just want to say as well is Jesus sat there at the multiplication of the bread and the feeding of the thousands, and he sat there on a hill looking down, and he sees the multitude of people coming in. And he asked Philip, and he says to him, where are we going to buy enough bread to feed these people? And it says, and he asked this question to test them, because he already knew what the plan was going to be. So, the next moment, Andrew said, we have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes. But how can they feed thousands of people? And Jesus just sat there because he knew already what he was going to do. The 5 loaves of bread and the 2 fishes was already in place. So don't let your seeming lack that you look at yourself and at your situation think that that's a barrier to God. That's the beginning of His miracles. So God don't want you to be complete, or that and don't think that you have to know more before He can use you. God don't want a perfect vessel. God wants a vessel. Because it's never about you. Never about you. It's about what He's going to go and do through you. So action and obedience unlock miracles. Again, I want to say to you, action and obedience unlock miracles. And the miracles will not be you that's going to do it. You must provide just your 5 fishes and 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes so that God can do the miracle. I just want to give you an example. When we in Mongolia, when we were there in that 6 months that we were caught there during the COVID lockdown, Charlotte went to the foster home, and she said to them, there was about 50 kids in a foster home, Christian foster home, what can I help you with? And then they asked her, what can you do? And she said, I'm an English teacher. And they said, yes, this is what we want you to do. We want you to come in daily or to our children to teach them English. So she taught them English because that is what she could do. That is what she had. And by teaching them English, she started developing a relationship with the mothers of every one of these homes, but also with the manager of the foster home. And by having and when she was there, she saw that the mothers of the children's homes were really not warm-hearted. So she arranged for a Zoom meeting with, or a Zoom course with Dirk and Talita from Petra on entering the world of a child, and it made a huge difference in the lives of those foster mothers for these little children. But then the relationship with her and Honguru was a manager built. So eventually we got Honguru down here, and she then did the course on trauma, walking with wounded children. She did the course, and then she also did the instructor course. So Honguru went back, and she is changing the way that they treat foster kids in Mongolia. And a lot of courses that she already presented, and last year she was appointed to the advisory board for the president on the future of treatment of foster kids in Mongolia. Because Charlotte can give English. She went in, she started giving English classes, and now Honguru is on the advisory board in Mongolia for the presidential advisory board. So that's the second thing, is bring what you have. God only needs you to bring what you have. He's going to do the miracle, because this was a miracle as well. The third thing is listen with your heart. So it says, Paul Tillich said, the first duty of love is to listen. David Augsburger said, being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person they are almost indistinguishable. I'm going to read it for you again. Being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person they are almost indistinguishable. So we are only 25 people in our church, so we decided that we are going to build relationships around, meaningful relationships around a cup of coffee. So, the first thing is, when you go and do that cup of coffee, you have to do the next 6 things. It's important. The first thing is, that person sitting in front of you is the most important person in your life at that moment. So, you put away your cell phone and you keep eye contact. You don't look at the people around. The second thing is you ask them to tell their story, because research has shown that everyone has a story to tell, but nobody wants to listen, unfortunately. So the problem there is we're sitting in a hasty, hurried world. Nobody wants to listen. Now, you tell that person, tell me your story. I give you a chance to do that. And when they tell the story, you don't fix them. That's my problem. I go in there, I fix, I come out. You don't fix them. It's about connection and not about correction. So you just sit and listen. And then you start asking the right questions. You guide them with questions so that they can get insight in their situation, in their spiritual situation. Then, after that, you invite them for a second coffee, because I'm going to build a relationship. You cannot give input in a life without a relationship. This is what we're going to go to. Then we're going to get to a stage where they're going to open that door of their heart. And when they open the door of the heart, you don't go in there and move the furniture around. You be gentle, because this is respect that that person give you. You have to treat them with respect because they give you a chance to look into their lives. And then you invite them to church. Right. Where do we see the best example of this? Is Jesus at the well. So he said to the disciples, go in town, go and get provisions. He went and sat at the well. in the middle of the afternoon. He had an appointment with a Sumerian woman. She arrives there. He breaks 3 barriers: religious barrier, a social barrier, and then a cultural barrier. And he starts asking her questions, gently asking questions, and he answers her questions. Eventually, in this question, asking question, answering question, she started developing insight in her spiritual situation, but also in who Jesus was. And then she started running down to a town, and a revival started in Samaria. A revival started because Jesus sat with a woman around the well. It's such a beautiful example on what a difference you can make, So the thing is, then, as I said to you, number 3 is you listen with your heart, not with your brain. Listen with your heart. The 4th thing is lengthen your table. So in Acts, not only talked about scattering here, but in the beginning of Acts, the Christians got together and they broke bread in each other's homes with gladness and with joy in heart. And God added saved people every day to their numbers. So this is how they did it. They sat around the table and they broke their bread in their homes. So Jesus walked through under the tree. Zacchaeus is sitting in the tree. He tells Zacchaeus, go home immediately, because tonight I'm going to come and eat with you. Jesus' ministry, when he taught in the public places. That's where he did his teachings. But inputs was done through relationships. And relationships was built around meals. So meals was not incidental to his ministry. Meals was the method of his ministry. So why did Jesus use meals? First of all, because tables create belonging. Belonging creates an open heart. An open heart creates transformation. So the meals was access to lives to cause transformation. Because when I invite you to my house for a meal, I say to you, you are worthy to come into my house, to come and sit around my table. Doesn't matter what our social structure is. Doesn't matter what our hierarchy is. You are worth sitting around my table. And when I tell you that you are worth sitting around my table, come and enjoy my meal with me, then your heart opens. And when your heart opens, then we start building relationships. And then from there on, transformation comes. So that's the 4th thing, sort of lengthen your table. Number 5, love your wife. We were made in the image of God. So God said in Genesis, let us make man into our image. Not according to our image or like our image, in our image. And we know that God's image is love, because that's what it says in the word. God is love. So we were created, intentionally created by God. Through love, to be loved and to have a relationship with God. So we were created to love and to be loved. And we were created for connection with God, but also with somebody else, with other people. So God created in us that longing to be loved by Him, to be in a living relationship with Him. And then He gave us a choice. And then He said, okay, you can decide if you want that relationship or not. But that need stays there. So if I have a relationship with God, that longing gets filled by God. But if I don't choose Him, that longing will stay. So when that longing stays, So people then don't know why they have this longing inside of them. It's like building a puzzle and taking the middle half out, or the middle piece out. So they try everything else to get self-worth and to feel, that they try to fill that need with a lot of other things that they try to do. But they can't fill that need because that need is built into you by God, and that need can only be filled by Him having a relationship with Him. But unfortunately, they know that there's a need. They know there's something missing. They know they got a longing inside them, but they don't know what it is, what they need to fill that. So we jump to Ephesians. In Ephesians, Paul says, and he talks about marriage, and he says, that marriage is a profound mystery to him. He says, and then he goes on and explain. He says that the intimate sacrificial love in marriage mirrors Christ's sacrificial love. In a marriage where two people sacrifice their lives to become one. And he says that mirrors God's love for the church. So what's the mystery? The mystery is that the church, that the marriage model the relationship between us as a church and God. And the secret is, that the marriage was designed from the beginning to point towards Christ. So the deep meaning of marriage is not a social contract or romance or anything like that. The deep-seated meaning of marriage is to show the world how Jesus loved His church. So if we are created through love to be loved, if we created for relationships, if we got that longingness in us that can only be filled by God, and the people don't know that, they must be able to look at your marriage and say, that's what I need. There's something in that marriage, in that love, that is what we need in ourselves. So love your wife, so that the people can see how Jesus loves us. Right, number 6 is the power of one. And this is about Paul's trip down to Damascus when God struck him with blindness. And then it says, so the Lord said to him, and when he talked to Ananias, arise and go to the street called Straight, and inquire at the house of Judas for one called Saul of Tarsus, for behold, he is praying. And in a vision he has seen a man named Ananias coming in and putting his hand on him so that he might receive his sight. Then Ananias answered, Lord, I have heard from many about this man, how much harm he has done to your saints in Jerusalem. And he has authority from the chief priest to bind all who call on your name. But the Lord said to him, go, for he is a chosen vessel of mine, to bear my name before Gentiles, kings, and the children of Israel. Ananias, again, God had this plan was already in place. He already sent the vision to Paul. But now he has to convince Ananias to go and do what he planned. So Ananias says, oh man, that guy's too scary to go down there. So he says to him, go. And we know that Ananias went, even though he was afraid of Saul. And the second, or the New Testament, is basically because Ananias was obedient to go to Saul. So we have to master the scary yes. We love to go and continuously fellowship with people that we know in our own social circuits that thinks the same as that we think. But that's not what God wants. God wants you to move out of that circle. So to go and lean into the uneasy relationships. To go out of your level of comfort And then you get to that situation there, you know, where sometimes the way we look at somebody, we got a certain perception of that person. And about history, the history that we have of that person give us this perception. But don't let that perception that you have, and the history that you have of that person, influence his future. So when God tells you to go to the street of that, or go and do that, and it's an uncomfortable relationship, go and do it. Because if Ananias didn't do it, we would have had a big problem with the New Testament. Then number 7, pray with intention. This church knows the importance of prayer. You can do anything you want to do. If you don't do it with prayer support and spend time with prayer, it's worthless. Because it says, Psalm 127 verse 1, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. As easy as that. I'm not even going to go into deeper than that. We can't go out without prayer. Number 8, bring 2 along. Say for you, we are 70 people. If you go and decide this year, I'm going to bring 2 people to church, every one of you. I'm going to bring 2 lonely people because there's 900 lonely people there. And you know about them, not only them, but all the people that need Christ. If I bring 2 people to church now, this year, us 70 people will be 200 by the end of the year. And then everybody just bring 2 other people then to church. By the end of next year, we are 600. 2. Only 2. That you have to bring to church. They will not come to church by themselves. You will have to go out and fetch him and bring them in. In the power of one, I just want to mention with you what happened with us at Sabi. We did the play Pilgrim. So I wrote a play, Charlotte and I wrote a play, and then I went to the church Sunday morning, and I said to him, listen, we're going to do a play this year. We're going to do 3 sold out shows the end of July. We got 42 positions for actors, but 34 will be fine. So we got 60 people in church. So I said to him, I need 34 actors. We can double up to 42. And then I need you for 6 months to come and practice every Wednesday evening. And every second Saturday morning, I want that as well. It's going to cost us 60,000 rand to present the play. Unfortunately, I missed. It was 240,000. But God provided that 240,000. I tell you now, 240,000 provided by God. That's why I believe God can do anything now, you know, and the confidence that I got from there. But if I knew that it was going to cost us 240,000, I would not have gone and the play. But I just learned from God there, this is how faith develops on the road, you know. He just gives you that message that you can handle. So now, if you tell that to the people, we are 60 people, I need 34 of you now to sacrifice Wednesday evenings every second Saturday morning for 6 months. It's not a nice offer to have a sold-out show for 3 evenings at the end of July. So a 7-year-old girl, her name was Mila. So we got the list up there at the church, at the end of the church. So I was wondering what is going to spark this thing for people to believe that this can work. Because there was a lot of skeptic people about that as well. A 7-year-old daughter, Mila, goes and writes her name, Mila, up at the top. Big letters. First name. Then she went to her mother and to her grandmother and said, I want you to be in this play with me. So her mother put her name up. And she's Cornell, the evangelist, who was such a brilliant voice. And then her grandmother was Barbara, who was Barbara Steenkamp, can run the whole of Sabi. But it started off by a 7-year-old girl that put her name up there, Mila, and then went to 2 other people and said, please, I want you to come and play with me. So the final night when we were there when we did the show there at Mbombela, there was between 800 and 900 people. We had 3 sold-out shows, 540 people in total. So it was roughly 1,500 people. I saw the miracle of Sabi. I experienced it through what happened. I stood there at the end of the last show and I saw, where did these people come from? There were normal, ordinary people in church that just put up their hands because a 7-year-old girl put up her hands first. And that's a powerful one. This is what I thought that I learned from there. And then lastly, we said 8+1. Social media is not an option, it is a must. We see that the new generation Z and so on, they've spent between 4 to 6 hours a day at social media. So I went there to our church and I looked at our Facebook placings. So we get 200 hits on a Facebook or views on a Facebook placing. Then I went and looked at Instagram. We get 600, roughly 600 on an Instagram posting. Then we got short videos that we do as well. So you get the short videos between 16 to 500. And the interesting thing is, what I saw is if you take a young boy with a cat, you get 500 views. You know, that is incredible. So there was much wiser words that was said by other people that get 16, 15, 20, 25. But the little boy who said joy, the word J, or the letter J, what it means to him, got 540. So I realized we are 25 people. We cannot reach as many people as we can without social media. So I sent 5 people on to training. So now for the last 3 months, we had an audiovisual team and that we trained our team. And we are now ready where we can go out. So we got, I want to just show you two pictures there. So we got an alpha room. So we realized we have to go into the town. So we're renting a room, 2 rooms. So one is what we call the alpha room, and the other one is what we call what we got a recording studio that we rent into a place and a big ministry there in town. So now just go on back, please. So this is alpha room. This is where we in the morning we had our meetings with our ladies meeting, men's meeting, that type of thing. And then we got the church together and said, please, we would like to make this alpha room where we're going to do our future courses and especially alpha courses, but we're also going to do all our meetings there. And we're going to do our coffees there. Because this still is what I feel is a main area for us that we can build relationships. There's a video alpha room. So this is how we looked. We worked there for 3 or 4 Saturdays. The team, the alpha team was really brilliant. And now there's a video. Can you play that video for me, please? That's what the 25 people did with that room. And for 3 Saturdays, there's a lot of time that was spent in there. But that little room that you saw with the seats, this is where it is now. And this is our hub. And I tell you, we're going to touch lots and lots and lots of people there within that. But 70,000 rand. 70,000 rand was provided for us. We don't owe anything there. So now to end off on the social media. So we went and looked at the social media postings, and we saw that within the first 3 seconds, the person will take a snapshot and decide if I want to go and see this video. And then we talk about the sloping from 10 to 30 seconds. Then he will decide those that will still stay, that's not sort of 50-50 in the first 3 seconds, they will then decide at the end of 30 seconds, this is it. I'm going to go and look at it or not. So we changed our approach now, and we're going to now, from this week, put out 30-second videos. We got somebody there. His name is Edwin. His brain is incredible. He is such a creative person. He's doing the praise and worship. I said to him, you only do praise and worship now, and you create content for me for videos. Nothing else. Even though he's a deacon, he doesn't need to do anything else. He must just give me one video a week. So this is the video that he produced for us last week in the 30-second bracket. Yeah, so can I just have the photo of the recording studio? So we got the recording studio now. This is how a recording studio do. All the equipment is there now for podcasts and everything, but this is where we're going to push a drive now. And from next week, we're going to do that. But this, all this, is only possible through God. But I just want to tell you, go further. Go further. So I want to end with this and change Matthew 28, and I want to say, therefore, go into the world and make disciples over one coffee a week, one phone call of encouragement a week, one meal a month. And the only thing that you need to sacrifice is time. Thank you.